I wanted to learn Dutch. So I came here with the mindset of, okay, I'm coming to the Netherlands. I want to integrate myself properly with the culture, with the people. So I decided, why not learn the language, which is something new to me. So yeah, and that made my experience 10 times better, I would say, because when you speak to Dutch people and you're an international student speaking in Dutch, they're more likely to talk to you in a very welcoming way. And they enjoy it when people speak Dutch because they speak English as well. So why not speak to them in Dutch? So I would say this is my experience here: food, traveling, and learning Dutch. The best 3 things I've done here.
So if we're going to talk more about it, I know you have studied in Cairo I'm not sure, but for 5 years, in your latest 5 years. But we'd like to know more about the differences between. Have you studied before in the UAE?
Yes. Born and raised. I had to move to Cairo when I was 14 until I graduated high school. But I would say Dubai was my home. I've experienced living there most of my life.
Yeah. So what are the main differences that you have noticed between studying in the UAE and moving them to Netherlands, I would say? Or maybe if you can highlight between Cairo and Netherlands.
Yeah, I mean, Dubai, similarly to Cairo, I would say I wouldn't have gotten out of my comfort zone as much as I did when I moved to the Netherlands, especially that being on my own, completely independent, having to take care of myself as well as taking care of my education. That really had a personal growth in me. And yeah, another difference I would say is that I got to meet a lot of international people, which really shaped me today. Because when you meet people from all around the world, you start learning about different things, different cultures, different mindsets, perspectives, especially when it comes to what I'm studying. It was really challenging for me at first because what I study, you really get the chance to criticize yourself, criticize others, the way they think, and as well as accepting what other people say all the time, even though it hurts sometimes when people say things. But you have to take it in. So that I experienced that here a lot. In the UAE, I would say, because we're all it's rooted in the way, in our upbringing, the culture, the traditions. I would say people have similar perspectives in most of the things. Some people, of course, break out of it, but I would say we all grew up together. We all have same perspectives, same ideas towards things. So you don't get the chance to actually break out of your comfort zone as much. So when I moved here, I really had I was forced to, I would say, to do that, which I would say is completely different. And if you compare it to Cairo, I mean, yeah, I would say same thing.
So when you first got there, I know it's a new experience, and as you said, you had to be on your own and all of that. What was the main challenges that you faced in the very beginning of your studying there?
This might sound personal, but I did not know how to cook. I did not know how to cook at all. All I knew how to do was instant noodles and cereals and coffee. So I really had to learn on my own first in order to survive. So that was hard. That was a challenge for me at first, I would say. But now I'm a professional in cooking. Honestly, I had to learn. But other than that, I would say in the Netherlands, you might know the public transport is not as simple as it looks to be. And to me, when the first time I went to university, I got in the tram and I knew the stop of the university, and I was like, okay, this is going to be easy. I got in the tram and I had my headphones on and I was like, okay, I'm focused. And the next thing I know, I was in the last stop, completely abandoned, alone in the tram. And they started cleaning the tram. Everyone left. And I was like, where am I? I have no idea. And I got out of the tram. I don't know where I am. And yeah, I was like, okay, this is going to be hard to learn. It took me some time. It took me a month, I would say, until I got a hang of it. I got a hang of the public transport. That was hard because in the UAE, we're so used to being in a car with someone that knows where they're going. And you're just like, okay, I'm just going to sit and relax, listen to my music, and I'll be at my destination. But here, I was like, okay, I need to focus. I need to know where I'm going.
how would you encourage anybody to study in the Netherlands? What are the main things that you think that they only exist in Netherlands, so people can only go there and take all of that only in Netherlands?
I would say, let's speak of the city first. I would say the city is city of Amsterdam. From my experience, is a student-based city. You find a lot of students everywhere you go. Students from the university around the city, which is very nice and welcoming. You feel like you're not on your own in the city. And another thing, the university campus is beautiful. It's amazing, honestly. And they provide you with all the facilities you need, coming from like your comfort and your education. And my education in the Netherlands, I would say my program is relatively difficult. It's an intense program, and yeah. I would say I had a crazy experience in the university, but I would say overall the education is really, really good. And I learned a lot of skills rather than like theory, which is really good for later. And when I first started I was not comfortable speaking about anything. I was so shy. I was very, very shy. And when I went to the university, they really encouraged me to speak. I started like joining the student-led parties. I started joining clubs in order to like, help enhance these skills, which the university like highly provides. Another thing I enjoyed in this university is that it's very focused on student-led political parties. I'm actually a member in the inter-party to student-led party, one of them for my major. And we advocate for transparency and democracy in the university, which the University of Amsterdam highly advocates, which I think is a beautiful thing because you feel like you're living in a city within a city. Like the University of Amsterdam in itself is a city with a lot of political parties that are student-led. And we actually end up making the decisions for our faculty, which is amazing. Honestly, I don't know if that happens in other universities. When I heard that this happens in the University of Amsterdam, I was like, okay, so we're actually in control of our educational years. That's actually amazing. And yeah, one of the things we're working on right now is having the University of Amsterdam more accessible for disabled people, because the lecture halls are not very accessible for disabled people. So we decided to provide them with more facilities to make that more accessible. And that's all led by students, which I think is amazing because we as students are doing stuff for other students just like us. And yeah, I think this is the best experience I've had in the university, is that I feel like I'm in control of my own my life in the university.
So I know that the Dutch are really disciplined. They pay attention to detail. They themselves are very hardworking and very practical. So any other sort of personality traits that you really admired while studying in Holland?
Yeah, honestly, me myself, I've always been very, very focused on details. So I did not know that about the Dutch. And when I came here, I saw, wow, life is so structured here. People are so structured. Like when they say we have a meeting at 2, they show up at 2, and living in Cairo, I don't know where to begin. Like that wasn't the thing. I was always the one that goes early and just left there waiting. So yeah, I mean, that really worked with my personal views, I would say. And I also in university, I learned that even in assignments and stuff, when they would give you an assignment with a rubric, they expect you to follow the rubric, and like every single detail in the rubric, and that shows, the Dutch personality, even in the education, which really works for me because I'm such a rubric person. Give me steps, give me like requirements, and I'll follow them.
So, Hind, did anything in you change since you started studying in Holland? I know that you mentioned that you had to pay attention for public transport, etc. But you as Hind, how did you mature while you were there?
Aside from meeting a lot of people from all over the world, which actually, like, without even thinking about it, helps your personal growth. Another thing I would say is that I'm more focused details, just as I mentioned earlier. Living alone also in itself really helped me focus on my hobbies, I would say, much more. since you have a lot of time on your hands, you have a lot of time to actually look into things that interest you, which for me is arts. Honestly, I love painting, I love drawing, which over here I had a lot of time to do than back home, because when you're back home, you're invested in the family time, a lot of like time is taking away from your personal time, which is very understandable. But over here, I really had time for myself, which actually helped me know more about myself, know more about my personality, my character, who am I as Hind.
So I know that you have an understanding of how the university life here in the UAE is and how things are run. We're basically like the American system where you have 4 years of bachelor's and you kind of have 2 semesters in each year. So this is the same thing in Holland? And I'm asking this for a general public who perhaps doesn't know that.
Yeah, so the university here is completely different, because I did American high school curriculum for my high school, which was completely different. Over here, we have 2 semesters as well, but each semester is divided into 3 blocks, and each block contains 2 courses. So like after the end of the year, you have two semesters in your degree. And yeah, we start in September and finish in July. I think in the UAE, you finish a bit earlier. I have some family members in university. But yeah, I would say also here, the difference is that we don't have much holidays as the UAE, which I envy very much. But they give you a lot of time to actually relax and breathe. And in the semester, the final block, which is the 3rd block, we have something called an Integrative Seminar, where you actually have the choice to choose anything of like a creative subject to study, like, for example, music, art, drama, things like that, which I think is very nice for students, because after all this hassle, you get time to actually invest into something, one of your hobbies, I would say, which is really nice. So this is like a break for us, a break in university.
So Hind, you mentioned that you're aiming to join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, perhaps after you graduate. Where are you thinking of going on an internship? Perhaps somewhere in Holland?
I was actually looking for internships here in the Netherlands, but the problem is, like, with my highly intense program that I'm studying, the internships here are provided for 6 to 9 months, and I need to integrate that into my studies, which I think for me is going to be too stressful. So I was thinking after I graduate, I might do an internship here and then get back home, just to enhance my Dutch as well. And another thing, I'm actually thinking of working for a few NGOs over the summer, sharing my knowledge with like non-governmental organizations, just to learn more, be more into the workspace of my major. But eventually I'd love to work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's the goal.
It's always best perhaps to join somewhere where you can learn the actual office skills. Because, we learned a lot about theory, yes, and, the debates, etc. But it's really helpful to polish some of your Excel skills, to be honest. Maybe that's just a tiny piece of advice from someone who worked 10 years on polishing their Excel skills. So going to my question. So you said you're majoring in psychology, in politics and economics. And what else was the 4th major?
Law.
On law. So how does all that mix come together? Can you perhaps give us a bit of a clearer image?
Yes, of course. So in the first year, you get to do all 4. So in order to see which one interests you the most. So in your second year, you would specialize in that particularly. So I would say the courses are like, we have a course for economics, markets and organization, where it's completely focused on business and economics. We have courses in law, justice, morality, where you get to actually learn stuff about law and how it works. And also what they try to do is that they include politics with law, which is very similar if you look at it from a certain perspective. And then you get to learn things about political economy, which is politics and economics together. We have courses about decision making, which is psychology, which you can use in politics, law, and economics. You see how like they're all connected in some way. And I chose the majors because I thought, in today's world, nothing is really one path. When you work somewhere, you have to have knowledge and skills from a lot of other places, because you're going to be working with people from all other majors. So I thought this is really interesting to me, because when I think of politics, I don't only think about like politics itself. I think, what is the psychology behind politics? you know, how does it work, like, you know, law-wise, like justice and stuff. How does it work when you think about the economics behind, like the politics behind economics, you know? So I thought this puts everything together. So that's very interesting to me.
This brings to my mind, like, in the future, after you graduate, what are you going to be specialized in? I know it's a combination of different majors that are like all combined, but is there a specific job career path that you can follow, or is it like, if you can tell us more about the job careers for your background?
Honestly, from what I've heard from like graduates in my major, that you can work everywhere. That's what they keep telling me. You can work everywhere. It's just you have to find something that interests you the most. And to me, that's politics. That's always been politics from day one. So that's why I chose to specialize in politics. And when I specialized in politics in this year, we got more into the focus of politics, like international relations, conflict and cooperation studies, public policy and things like that. And I would say from my perspective, like my career path would be working in politics, but I want to incorporate economics with it, because eventually I'd like to start my own business. And I think that would be very helpful to me, my economics background. But law is not really my best interest, but it's part of my major, so I had to do it.
As for your further higher education, how are you planning on proceeding with that one?
For my master's, I still haven't decided what I want to do. A lot of things interest me, but I would say I'd like to go more into public policy. That's the most thing that interests me so far in my education. So probably doing a master's in public policy.
Would you still do that in Netherlands, the University of Amsterdam?
Yes, definitely. Honestly, I'm not ready to leave. Like my experience so far in the Netherlands has been so amazing. I don't think I'm ready to leave yet. I honestly, deep down, don't even want to graduate, which I think I haven't heard any students say before. I just want to stay a bit longer. You know, I'm taking my time. I'm enjoying it here. It's really nice.
So, Reem, as a person who had colleagues and friends from Netherlands, what is your take on this career conversation?
Well, if I can split the answer into two sides, as a person who has colleagues and friends from the Netherlands, and another answer on terms of career. So the first part, as Hind wonderfully mentioned, I would say almost everybody who I met from the Netherlands have been extremely open people, very independent, very disciplined. Especially my friends who would really get upset when I'm late. And because, you know, in the UAE, we're a little bit chill in terms of coming together on casual meetings, but they take that very seriously. So, but they understood, they took it lightly. I became more disciplined when it comes to meeting them on a casual outings. But in terms of workspace, one of the best people I have worked with, and I actually learned a lot. And people from the Netherlands are very open and very welcome. And they're very interested in the people who really want to know more about the Netherlands. And I'm one of them. Before I went on a vacation to Amsterdam, I actually had long lists of places to visit, where to eat, etc. What I really took notice of, and I really admired, that a lot of the people from Netherlands really put focus on the cultural aspects where I can find in Amsterdam, like the Anne Frank Museum, the Amsterdam Museum, and many other cultural places. But I like that they put that in the priority more than the restaurants. It was because what I knew about Europe was only one side of Europe, which is basically Paris, UK. I didn't really go as far to know more about the Netherlands, but this really opened my eyes. This is in terms of having friends and colleagues. For the other part, which is a career conversation, is basically, it's just a regular, you know, I noticed that career is basically something universal. Almost everybody has the same experience. What I would give to Hind, perhaps, as someone who's going to be freshly graduating soon, in a year, correct, Hind? Is that correct? I would say that once you graduate, the work life is totally different. As you said, there's a rubric in each semester, 3 rubrics in a year. You won't find these rubrics once you start working. So I would say you need a lot of resilience, a lot of patience, and that's where you really become an adult, really. I myself, as I mentioned, majored in international relations and diplomacy, both my bachelor's and master's degrees at Zayed University. But I went on to study business administration, and I took some courses in psychology, as you mentioned, which is perfect. Like, it's amazing how your university grouped all these four within, because they really are interdisciplinary. So I would say you have to have tough skin once you graduate. And I'm sure you being abroad, you already gained that. Hind, when you mentioned that you started opening up, starting being more independent, that's what the career really needs. But don't await that rubric. That won't happen. Keep that in your mind. You have to create your own rubric.
And are there any plans for you to actually proceed your work with in the Netherlands, or is it only going to be here in the UAE?
As mentioned earlier, I was planning on working here for a few months before moving back to the UAE, just to enhance my Dutch, I would say. And I'm not ready to leave the Netherlands yet. I would say not ready. And that's the plan. But my long-term plan would be moving back to the UAE, hopefully after years of living abroad, 5 years in Cairo, then 4 to 5 years in the Netherlands. So I'm ready to move back home.
Okay, if there is an advice that you would give to all Emiratis here on encourage them to study in the Netherlands, what would it be?
Honestly, as cliche as it sounds, I would say if you're traveling abroad anywhere around, even the Netherlands, I would say travel with an open mind and an open heart and a willingness to learn. That's what I did. I came here, I didn't know anyone, I didn't know anything, and I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with its people, its culture, and everything here. And that's us human beings. We adapt. Anywhere we're put, we just adapt to it. And that's what I would say to anyone moving to the Netherlands, whether students or not. And yeah, I would say travel a lot around the Netherlands. It's so beautiful, such amazing places, amazing nature outside of the city of Amsterdam or the big cities in the Netherlands. You should go to small towns, meet people there, eat their food, live the way they live. Do not bring the UAE with you there, but actually keep your UAE in you, but get more Dutch in you as well. I would say that's really, really important in order to get used to the life here. And learn the language, I would say. Even if everyone speaks English, just learn the language. They love when you speak Dutch. It really excites them. Another thing I would say is that the University of Amsterdam is honestly like a really good university. It's rated really, really high, which I think students need to know that. It's a different experience. It's different than living anywhere around Europe. It's very professional, very nice for students, completely safe for women, which I think is very important in today's world. That would be my advice: open mind and open heart and willingness to learn.
So Hind, we were discussing offline how important it is to learn how to ride a bicycle. Do you think perhaps that's a piece of advice we should give to anyone interested to?
Sorry. Yes, I'm new to the biking experience, therefore I don't think I'm the best one to speak about this experience, but I recently learned how to ride a bike less than a year ago, and I started riding a bike here in the Netherlands a few months ago. That is an experience. I was telling Reem earlier that if you really want to see the Netherlands, you need to get a bike. Get on your bike and move around. Honestly, there are paths everywhere in the Netherlands for bikes, and you don't get to see the city if you're not on a bike, because that's what people do here. They ride their bike and they move on.
So Hind, if I may, can you just describe for the people who are listening to us right now and who are interested in studying in the Netherlands, what's your typical day routine?
Living in Europe in general, you would say you have to wake up early because life starts really, really early here. So I got used to that. That's one thing that changed in me, I would say too. I wake up early, have my cup of coffee while staring at my beautiful canal in front of my apartment. It's honestly amazing. And yes, I get ready. If I have university, my university is a 15-minute walk, but it's a 5-minute bike ride. Since I ride a bike now, I just take my bike, go to university, study for a bit in our study building in university. And then in my breaks, because I live in the center and the university is in the center as well, so you get to walk everywhere around the city. So in my breaks, I love like grabbing small lunch, small bite, as the Dutch people call it, the toastie. I get my toastie and I walk around the city, And then in the evening, I meet some friends for dinner. I think it's very important if you're studying abroad to have friends to have dinner with, because this is a time where you actually sit with people and like interact, which I think is very important. Yes, and then but since I wake up very, very early, by 9, I'm just exhausted and tired. So I take my bike and head back home. And yes, the day starts all over again. But I would say, since my program is very, very intense, most of what I do is study. But I always make time for my regular walks around the city, because honestly, I never get enough of the beautiful views of Amsterdam.
If you were talking to a past Hind, the one who first came to Amsterdam, what would you tell her to pack? Whether mentally, whether in the luggage, where everything.
First of all, do not get an umbrella, because even though it rains a lot, but the wind does not allow you to hold an umbrella. Yeah, the amount of times I lost my umbrellas from the wind. Like, physically, the clothes, I would say pack a lot of jackets. It's always cold. All year long, it's cold. You get 1 week of sun in the summer, which is nice, but not worth packing summer clothes. Another thing, mentally, I would say, yeah, get your emotional support with you, because you might not find it all the time here, you know? Get your comfort and emotional support with you, I would say. For me, I learned it the hard way. I had to find my space here with myself first before finding my space with other people. And I did that through like investing time in my hobbies, which I think is important here. So I would say come with the readiness to have some struggles here, because it's not always easy. It's not always easy being alone. But once you get used to it, once you make yourself feel at home, mentally and emotionally, you're going to be stable. But as long as you have the mindset that, oh, back home would have been easier, back home would have been better, then you're never going to pass that stage of finding your comfort and where you are. So I would say, yes, that's the most important thing, which I learned the hard way. So I would tell future students to do otherwise. Yeah.
What do you do when you really miss home? I know you get that a lot, but that's going to be very helpful.
I call my grandma. I tell her, teach me some things. I want to cook some Emirati food, you know, because I learned how to cook here and it wasn't very traditional. So I would like Zoom call her, like video call her, and she would teach me how to cook. And that really gives me a sense of comfort, because, you know, when you're eating food from home, it just reminds you of like everything good that happens back home. And I can't just pack my bag and go back. It's a 7-hour flight. And so what I do is just eat some food that reminds me of home. It usually really makes me feel good. And usually on Fridays, which is the day the family gathers back home, but for me, Friday's university day. So when I look at my family gathered back home, I always call them and I video call them, and I just tell them, just keep me there, you know, keep me in the video call. I just want to feel like I'm with you. It makes me feel really good. But during like university days, you know, you're just busy with your own life and stuff. You don't really feel that homesick as you would do in the weekends, particularly Fridays.
One last thing I wanted to ask as well, if anybody is actually interested in studying in Netherlands here from the UAE, are you aware or do you have any idea about if we have here sponsorships or actually a full program that we provide to students to make it easier for them to study in Netherlands?
Yes, I'm glad you asked, Ashley. I have a full scholarship from the Ministry of Education in the UAE. I applied to it when I knew I'm going to travel abroad, and they were actually very, very helpful, especially that there aren't much Emirati students here. They got me connected with the embassy right away, and the embassy has been very, very helpful in like guiding me through the whole process. I never felt like I was on my own, because they were always checking up on me, which I think is very important since I came here very, very young. And yeah, the Ministry of Education actually is very helpful. The scholarship helped me a lot, and it's the reason why I'm studying here right now. So I would say, like, I'll tell the students to check the scholarship, the Ministry of Education scholarship. And I'm sure there are a lot of scholarships that they give to Emirati students to study here. I know that for the university actually provides scholarships. I got a nice percentage out of my tuition fee at first, but then I got the scholarship from the Ministry of Education, so I had to let the other one go. But they do provide scholarships from the university as well. If your grades are high and if your application stands out, they actually help financially.
It's actually amazing. Glad to hear that. Like, we're providing this here in the UAE. And I think after this one, lots of people here in the UAE will be very much interested in studying in Netherlands. I think maybe Reem as well, like as she's instructing and this is her main field, maybe she would be interested to go and check the education in Netherlands so it can help her better in her career path.
Well, I just like to add on that. I always had this conversation with my friends from the Netherlands and how was your education? And I'm not just speaking about university, but school. And they said the teachers there were very warm, very loving. And that's why perhaps I can see that they have such a wonderful and open and outgoing personality. And they're not afraid to make mistakes and they own up to their mistakes. So that really comes from school. And maybe if I visit again the Netherlands as a whole, maybe that's something I really want to bring into our schools, to our universities, is that self-confidence in students. As Hind mentioned, the first time she went there, she was very shy and then she learned to open up. And I think it's because the environment there perhaps pushes you to say something, pushes you to, and when I say environment, I'm not saying the society, but I'm saying the extracurricular activities, everything within the education system. So maybe if we can bring some of these wonderful things within, because as you know, the UAE is always into knowledge-based economies, always trying to improve. So perhaps my next trip would be more into that. I would really love to, inshallah, someday. I would like to ask Hind, did she meet any Dutch students who spent time in the UAE, perhaps studying or on internship?
I actually haven't met anyone that studied in the UAE, but I've met a lot of people that went on vacation, of course, since Dubai is like destination to go to. But no, actually I haven't met anyone that lived there for a long time.
We're interested to know what was the impression about the UAE?
A lot of buildings. Yeah, and a lot of tourists, a lot of foreign people. But I always tell them, if you're visiting the UAE, you need to get in touch with a local, because you won't get to see the UAE without someone that actually knows their way around the city. Like I had a few friends that came, they visited from the Netherlands actually in December last year. And I took them to Hatta, which was I took them to Hatta.
That's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, I took them there and we went around Sharjah for a bit. I showed them the old traditional places. You know, I did not take them to downtown Dubai because this is something you see every day, but you don't get to see these places that only locals would take you to. So yeah, and they saw a different UAE. They loved it.
I think Reem, you have brought earlier that you asked actually Hind if there are any Dutch students here in the UAE. And Hind, you have actually said there are no. You didn't actually meet anybody from Netherlands studying in the UAE. So with that being said, and learning from both of your experiences, how would you think that we can encourage students in Netherlands to come and study in the UAE?
Well, the first thing is that the UAE has become a very diverse and international community. So I don't think you're going to feel not at home in the UAE. The UAE is very warm, very welcoming, very tolerant. One of the most tolerant countries in the world, to be honest. And we rate very highly on the tolerance scale. Other than that, as Hind mentioned, she said, I wanted to get out of the comfort zone. So let me use that as a way to get students into the UAE, that we actually have a big comfort zone. It's rarely that a lot of people who live here feel that they're not at home. And that's something really comforting. Things here are very easily accessible. You can find a lot of things to do, whether when you're on your time off, as we mentioned, if you're deciding to study in Abu Dhabi, in Sharjah, in Dubai, whatever in the UAE, it's a very close proximity. The furthest part from Abu Dhabi to Fujairah is around 4-hour drive, and like from Abu Dhabi to Dubai, that's just like 45 minutes to an hour if there's good traffic. So close proximity is really helpful. Other than that, I could say that we have very high caliber facilities and resources available. This is in terms of, let's say, you don't have to worry about your groceries. Everything the groceries are are reasonably affordable here. Even furniture is affordable if you're thinking of coming and staying in a dorm or perhaps renting, etc. It is very easy to come as a group of students and decide to live somewhere in the UAE, rent an apartment or whatever. It's relatively easy. It's not that complicated. Taxation is extremely low. We have taxation on specific services and not everything. We don't have income tax. Other than that, you get to really enter people's homes. As Hind mentioned, if you really want to know the UAE, you have to get to know a local. Even if it's not a local, any sort of nationality, we're very open. We let people in. We invite people. You'll never grow hungry here. You're invited all the time. And if you decide to come to the UAE, don't hesitate to ask. We, the locals, or even people who are expats in the UAE, we kind of have that sense of helping each other out. So you'll never find a difficulty in trying to maneuver or feel lost or whatever. Everybody's willing to give you a helping hand. In terms of what you're going to be studying, now, of course, we don't have as much majors as, let's say, in the Netherlands, but we have excellent curriculum. And a lot of people, once they get to know me as Reem and a lot of my colleagues who graduated from Zayed University, they're amazed from the knowledge and the work ethics and education that we had. They think that we studied abroad, but we actually just studied in Zayed University here in Abu Dhabi. So this gives you an indication in how advanced is our education system here in the UAE.
So I'd just like to say that honestly, it's amazing to meet like such strong women as yourselves that have studied in the UAE and are just representing our country in a very nice way. And I would say another thing that the UAE really provides is for young entrepreneurs to move there and start their businesses by being highly supported by the people, which I think is very important in today's world because young people are coming up with all these amazing ideas and the UAE is just taking them in and providing everything they need for that.
And perhaps if I just may add just a tiny little bit of why I do encourage students from the Netherlands to come and study in the UAE is it's a very safe country. It's one of the safest countries in the whole world. So put your parents' minds at ease. If you decide to come to the UAE, you are safe, you are welcome. And we are more than happy to have you here.
Yeah, so I think it was an honor having you and learning more about Netherlands. I myself didn't know a lot about it, and it actually made me to think even for myself, to even like think for my future, maybe to consider this country to study in. As I was searching in the beginning, like they were saying that in the Netherlands, it's one of the top 0.2% in the world in education, which is actually like more than amazing to learn in such a country. So I hope that we have more locals to study in Netherlands and have different experiences and gain that much of experience. You're such a great person. You're such a great intellectual person. So I hope we have more such Emiratis doing that. Thank you, Reem, for actually being there. Thank you, Hind, for coming to this talk and participating in it and teaching us more about Netherlands, things that we didn't know before.
Thank you, Amna. It's an honor to be here. I'd love to see more Emirati students in the future, and hopefully I can guide them through the process once I graduate. And thank you so much, Reem. I had an amazing talk with you, both of you.
Thank you so much, Hind. Thank you, Amna.